Tuesday morning. I am on my way, actually out of the Menards parking lot. I had to come over and get a couple little casters so I can move some stuff around in my garage. But on the way over here, I got to thinking. You know, you listen to the radio and songs come up and they make you think about things. Last night, my one of my grandchildren, who is 10 years old, he called and he must have some kind of thing going with school because he was asking a ton of questions about all kinds of different stuff. You know, who is your hero when you were growing up? You know, a lot of stuff about our past. And, you know, of course, my immediate response was my dad, who to this day I would respect as my hero because he was the type of person that everybody should be. He was very honest, hardworking, and he kind of fell into the category of tall, dark, and handsome besides. Obviously, I didn't inherit much. I guess it skips every other generation or some crazy thing like that. But anyway, he was asking a series of questions, and one of them that really made me think is he said, what was different when you were young compared to what's going on now for people 10 years old? And I thought, you know, my first knee-jerk reaction was, well, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have internet. We didn't have computers. We had pencils. We had paper. And we had nuns in school that beat us with rulers. But we didn't have any of the, the tech or any of that stuff. And I have to say, we probably didn't miss having it because we never knew what it was, I guess. So, you know, I told him, I said, well, you know, a lot of things were different. You know, we didn't have electronics, so there was no games. You know, we didn't sit around and play games all day. What we did is we got together with our schoolmates and we'd drum up stuff to do. I said we'd go for bicycle rides. We'd go down by the local ditch, which was basically just a mud-filled little stream. But to us, it was a place we could sit around and act stupid and catch bullheads. And we'd do stuff like that. Maybe we'd get together and play shoot some baskets or play some baseball or something like that. And basically, we entertained ourselves. I said, you know, that's kind of a big deal too. And instead of relying on, you know, technology to entertain us, we entertained ourselves. And I said, you know, I would go in my dad's shop and I would grab some scrap lumber and I would build something. You know, maybe from my train set, I'd build a little building or something, or I'd build a birdhouse. So I said, you know, growing up on a farm too was really a neat thing. You know, we had the woods, so I could go play in the woods. You could maybe go trap gophers. I mean, there was an infinite number of things that we could do, and it was almost all outdoors. You know, so it was I look back at it, it was a really a good way to grow up. You know, it's too sad that people don't experience that type of a youth where they go through all that really makes you maybe a little bit better person, maybe. I don't know. But aside from that, I said, you know, but there are so many things that have never changed and never will change from what I can see. You know, back in when I was young, you know, that was in 1950s. I was born in 51. You know, so I kind of became aware of what was going on in the 60s. I think the Vietnam War started in 62, maybe 63, 62, I believe. I should know this. Anyway, I said, you know, people were racist, and they were cruel, and there was a lot of bad things toward people of color and anybody who wasn't white, and really had that changed. We're actually going backwards. Since 2016, America has become more racist, and we've really taken the downhill slide. I don't know if it's quite as bad as it was in the 50s and in that era, but it's pretty darn close. So I guess some things just don't change. And I'm not too sure if technology is a double-edged sword. It can make life, right here I'm doing a video on my phone, and the technology allows me to do this and speak my mind, and then I can broadcast it to whoever wants to waste some time and watch it. Where in the past you'd actually have to maybe get out a piece of paper and draw some sketches and write it down, and it was a lot more work. So that, in that way, technology has really made things better. We're more informed about what's going on in the world, all over the world. Where it used to take, things would happen, like, for instance, Woodstock. I didn't know about Woodstock until a year after it happened. I was a little late to that party, wasn't I? And the protests, the Vietnam protests, even there I was a little bit behind the times because we just didn't have the technology to make it all that well known. We did have television. It was black and white. Before that it was just radio, and we didn't have any MP3s or CDs or DVDs or any of that. We had tape. I had a little tape player, I guess, which was just voice, and we had 8mm. My brother had an 8mm camera, so we had movie nights every once in a while, and they were really hokey. But it's what you did. But the downside, anytime there is a technological improvement to our lives, like the car, for instance, makes life so much better. I mean, I just drove 27 miles to Menards to pick up $21 worth of casters. In the old days, I would have to go all day on a horse probably to get there, and then stay overnight because I'd never make it back in one day. Where, think of today, it's like nothing. But then again, look at all the people that die every year in car accidents, and all the damages that are done by cars. Pedestrian deaths are way up, mainly because of pickup trucks, believe it or not. They sit so tall that it's hard a lot of times, especially small children. Drivers don't see them and they run over them. And I didn't realize that was a thing, but I just found out yesterday that pedestrian injuries and deaths are way up. Then you got social media, which is a sewer. It's a good way to share your experiences and your opinions, but it's a sewer. And it's unfortunate that, especially the Trump cult, they get most of their information from, Fox News and Newsmax and Instagram and X and all these sewer type outlets, which they really are. They think it's research, but it's really just a pile of garbage. And finding a reliable source is difficult. I mean, you really have to search out people that are experts in their field and that are actually credible. So you got to do background checks on the people that are feeding you information. And, anytime I see something, like I think I saw something about Elon Musk was in the hospital and he was all beat up and whatever, you have to assume right away that it's made up, that it's not true. I don't know if it's true or not. I didn't really look into it. I'm guessing it was probably fake. So you have to kind of initially view everything as being false, and then try to prove that it's correct by investigating, again, reliable sources. Where do you find them? Well, you certainly don't find them on Facebook or Instagram or X especially. So it's a difficult time, a lot of times you'll hear people say, in the good old days, but the good old days weren't really any better. Like I say, back in the 50s and stuff, black people were getting lynched. Their houses were being burned. Asian Americans were getting beat up and murdered because, they were responsible for Pearl Harbor, even though they weren't. Not the ones, that were in the United States. Mankind can be cruel. So how do you answer a 10-year-old child when they ask you about what was it like growing up? Well, I guess you just tell them, it was different. And you tell them, we didn't have all the things they have, but we had other things that were, in our minds, maybe better. And you wonder, what will they tell their children? If humanity survives, will they have 10-year-old children that they can tell them what was different in their lives versus what the future children, what their life is going to be like? Yeah. Oh, it's a quandary. Looking back and looking ahead, I don't know which way is better. But you gotta look somewhere. But anyway, I just hope life continues and improves. That's all we can hope for.